Hello! In this video we're going to see how to use anynines to restore a PostgreSQL instance from a backup that you previously took. Here on my laptop I have a local Kubernetes cluster provisioned with Kind, and it already has anynines installed. Moreover, I already provisioned the PostgreSQL instance in it. Let's take a look at it. kubectl get pg, shorthand for PostgreSQL. Yep, there's one called sample pg cluster. I also have a helper script that shows all the data stored inside this PostgreSQL instance. So let's run it to see if it actually stores some data. Show data inside pg. And we can see that there's only one table which contains only one row, so not much data, but the key point for us is that there is some data. Besides the instance itself, in the cluster there's already a backup API object that we took in the previous video of this series. So let's take a look at it. kubectl get bkp, shorthand for backup. And yeah, there's one called backup sample. And if we look at it more in detail, let's do that now by seeing its YAML. We will see, if we look at the spec, that it's a backup for a PostgreSQL instance with name sample pg cluster, which is exactly the PostgreSQL instance I'm running. So this is a backup that was previously taken, and you'll have to trust me on this, but this backup was taken when the PostgreSQL instance contained the data that I've just shown you via my helper script. So the current state of the instance is in sync with that of the backup. And now let's assume a tragedy happens, and by mistake, some data that wasn't meant to be deleted is deleted from our PostgreSQL instance. Here I have a helper script to simulate just that. So let's execute it. It's called delete all data from PG. Now we run it. Okay, it should have succeeded. And we can actually verify this by rerunning the script that shows all the data inside our PostgreSQL instance. Show data inside PG. And yes, we should see that there's still one table, but there are now 0 rows, whereas previously we had one. Like I said, this is a tragedy, but if you remember, luckily for us, we have a backup in our cluster that was taken for this PostgreSQL instance. So how can we use it to restore our PostgreSQL instance and make sure that we can actually undo this data loss? The answer is by creating an API object of a custom kind installed as part of anynines called restore. And in fact, if we look at the CRDs in the cluster, we should see that there's a CRD called restore. kubectl get CRD, shorthand for custom resource definition, restores. Yep, there it is. So let's go ahead and write the YAML manifest for our restore so that we can undo this data loss. I already have one in my editor. Notice how the kind is restore, like we said. And if we look at the spec, there are two main fields, and one is backup name. Backup name is the name of the backup API object to be used to perform the restore. There's no namespace because it's assumed to be the same as the one of the restore. And then there's a service instance field, which identifies the service instance to restore. So what this spec means is restore this service instance here using this backup here. Notice how the name of the service instance is the one running in the cluster that I've shown you previously. And there's no namespace because the namespace is assumed to be the same as the one of the backup and restore. Another thing that I want to highlight is how there's a kind field, in our case equal to PostgreSQL, because we are restoring a PostgreSQL instance. But as we'll add support for more data services, the process to restore them would be exactly the same. You would still write and apply a YAML manifest of kind restore. The only thing that you would actually change would be the kind here. So for example, it would be Redis if you are trying to restore a Redis instance. So let's go ahead and actually apply this YAML manifest. kubectl apply file name restore.yaml. YAML. Okay, it went through. Now to monitor whether the restore is progressing, it has succeeded, it has failed, we can look at its status. kubectl get restore, restore sample was the name of our restore, output YAML, and here we go. We have a status field with a list of conditions that report on the progress of the restore. And we can see here that the top one says restore completed, status true, which means that the restore completed successfully. So what does this mean more concretely? It means that NE8 was notified of the restore, pulled the files of the associated backup from the cloud storage that you configured when you installed it, and used those files to, pardon the repetition, restore the PostgreSQL instance to the state in the backup. Which in our case means that if we now go back and look at the data stored inside the PostgreSQL instance, we should again see that there's at least, not that there's at least, sorry, but that there's exactly one row inside the only table in the instance. So let's do that using our helper script, show data inside PG, and voila! Everything worked as expected and our data is back in the instance, so we didn't lose any.